7 days before Christmas. The Grandview shopping center wasn't a mall anymore. It was a battlefield wrapped in tinsel. The air burned with cinnamon sugar and cheap perfume. Too sweet, too thick. The sound metal railings clanking, kids crying. Voices shouting pressed in from every side. For Vanessa Grant, this wasn't holiday shopping. It was survival. She gripped 5-year-old Lily's mittened hand like a lifeline. Knuckles white, fingers aching. Her eyes never lingered on the glowing windows or blinking lights. She watched exits, corners, reflections in glass. Any man over 6 feet tall, any uneven walk, any shadow that stayed too long. 3 months since they'd crossed the city and disappeared. 3 months on a mattress on the floor of a studio that smelled like mildew and boiled cabbage. 3 months of silence and silence. Vanessa knew was never peace. It was the breath before the scream. Daniel was still out there. Somewhere, a ghost at the edge of her vision. Every bump sent her heart slamming. Every loud laugh made her flinch. Mummy, look. The line is moving. Lily's voice cut through the chaos clear, bright, innocent. She tugged Vanessa forward, eyes glowing with reflections from the massive Christmas tree rising through the fur. Atrium. Vanessa forced a smile, the practiced kind, the kind that protected her daughter from the terror vibrating under her skin. I see it, baby. Just a little longer. They'd been in line for Santa's village for 45 minutes, 45 minutes standing exposed in open space. Every instinct screamed to leave. But Lily had begged. She'd seen the commercial on the tiny TV in the hospital waiting room while Vanessa worked her shift. For a week, it was all she talked about. Vanessa couldn't give her a bike, couldn't give her a tablet, couldn't even promise a full Christmas dinner, but she could give her 5 minutes with a fake Santa and a candy cane. It was free, and free was all she had left. She tugged the collar of her worn beige coat higher, hiding the frayed hem of her nurse's scrubs. Underneath, no time to change, no extra minutes. Every spare second belonged to Lily. She checked her cheap digital watch. 20 minutes. Then they had to leave before garage surge pricing kicked in. Next, the elf teenagers sounded bored to death. They shuffled forward. Vanessa scanned the atrium. Again, her gaze lifted to the upper-level glass railings, wide sightlines. 2 security guards leaned against a pillar, relaxed. Useless. Mall security stopped shoplifters, not violent ex-husbands, with gambling debts and fists that likes to talk. Mummy, do you think he knows? Lily whispered. Knows what, sweetie? That I was good. I made my bed, even when it was cold. Vanessa's throat tightened. The heater barely works at home. Lily slept in 2 layers. He knows, Vanessa said softly. Santa knows everything. As they rounded the final velvet rope, a chill crawled up. Vanessa's spine, not cold. Awareness. The feeling of being watched, not casual, focused, heavy, predatory. She spun around. Strollers, teenagers, an old couple sharing a pretzel. Nothing, she exhaled shaky. Broken, you're tired, hungry, paranoid. But the feeling didn't fade. Above them, on a mezzanine closed for renovations, Luca Santoro stood perfectly. Still, he didn't lean, He didn't fidget. He stood like he owned the railing, the floor. The air dot his tailored black coat concealed a shoulder holster as naturally as a watch. He wasn't supposed to be here. The mall was just a number in his portfolio, a money-cleaning machine. But something had pulled him out today. Then he saw her, at first. The faded coat fooled him. The messy bun. The hunched posture. Then she turned. Profile, ear, jaw, Vanessa. Grant. The name hit like a punch. High school, cafeteria, chemistry class. She'd borrowed a pen, made jokes, treated him like a human, the only bright thing in a violent youth. Now she looked like she was bracing for impact, thin too thin, and the child's small hand locked in hers, innocent, smiling. "Sir," Bruna said. "Situation near the south entrance." "Handle it," Lucas said quietly, "and slow the center line. They're not cattle." Bruno left out. Lucas stayed down below. Vanessa nudged Lily forward. "Go on, baby." Santa looked exhausted. Fake beard. Sagging suit. "What's your name?" "Lily, what do you want for Christmas?" "A doll, a bike." Vanessa prayed Lily would say, "Doll." Lily didn't smile. "I don't want toys." Santa blinked. "I want a daddy." The air died. Nervous laughs faded. Vanessa froze. "My mommy cries at night," Lily continued. "The old one was bad. I want a new one. One who brings food." Silence. Raw. Exposed. Santa panicked. "Elf, give her a coloring book." Lily broke, but I was good. "Next," Santa snapped. Vanessa stepped forward. "Wait." The word cut through the room. She turned. Lucas Santoro stepped into the light. He crossed the velvet rope like it didn't exist. One look silenced Santo completely. Luca crouched in front of Lily. "What's your name?" "Lily." He offered her a handkerchief. "You want a daddy who's strong?" She nodded. "And who brings food?" Again. "Consider it done." Gasps rippled. He unlocked the raffle case, lifted the massive doll, handed it to Lily. Wish granted. "Luca." Vanessa whispered. "We can't." He closed the distance. "You're not accepting charity," he said softly. "You're accepting a correction." He guided her away. "You're done running," he murmured. "I saw everything." As they disappeared into the private elevator, Vanessa felt the weight shift. Not gone, just replaced by something far more dangerous and far more powerful, Luca noticed. Without a word, he shrugged off his heavy wool coat. Before she could protest, he draped it over her shoulders. It was heavy, warm, and smelled of him. It enveloped her completely, falling to her knees. "Luca, you'll freeze," she said, looking at Jimin, just his suit jacket and crisp white shirt. "I don't feel the cold," he said simply. He walked toward a massive black SUV parked alone under a floodlight, its engine already humming, exhaust splumbing white smoke into the night air. Vanessa clutched the lapels of his coat, watching him walk ahead to open the door for Lily. She looked at her daughter, who was smiling for the first time in months. She looked at the man who had just rewritten their Christmas with a single command. She didn't know what the price of this rescue would be. In Luca's world, everything had a price. She remembered that much from the rumors in high school. But as she watched him gently help Lily into the booster seat that shouldn't have been there, but somehow seemed to fit the narrative of his preparedness, Vanessa realized she didn't care about the cost. For the first time in years, she wasn't the one standing between her daughter and the world. Someone else was standing in front of them. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with fizzy air, and walked toward the car. The shopping mall below them continued its frantic, noisy existence. But up here, in the shadow of Lucas Santoro, the silence wasn't terrifying. It was heavy. It weighs absolute. And for the first time, it felt like a wall rather than a void. Thuic. Before Christmas had started with a wish. She just hoped she could survive the granting of it. "Get in, Vanessa," Lucas said, holding the rear door open for her, his dark eyes unreadable against the snowy backdrop. She climbed in. The door shut with a solid, reassuring thud, locking out the wind, the cold, and the past. Or so she thought. She didn't know that the past was waiting for them at the exit gate, ready to test just how strong this new protection really was. But for this moment, in the leather-scented warmth of the SUV, she closed her eyes and allowed herself to breathe. The interior of the SUV was a sealed capsule of silence and leather, a stark contrast to the biting wind that had been whipping across the rooftop just seconds before. The heating system was already humming, pushing warm, filtered air against Vanessa's frozen cheeks, but the chill nestled deep in her bones refused to dissipate. She sat stiffly on the edge of the plush seat. The oversized wool coat Luca had ripped over her shoulders, pulling around her like a protective fortress. Beside her, Lily was already entranced by the thimiant lighting of the vehicle, her small fingers tracing the stitching on the armrest. The massive doll from the mall clutched tightly to her chest, as if she feared it might evaporate if she let go. "My car," Vanessa murmured, the reality of the situation piercing through the haze of shock. She leaned forward slightly, looking toward the driver's seat where Luca had settled in with a fluid, commanding grace. "Luca, I can just leave it. It's a piece of junk. I know, but it's the only way I can get to work. My nursing bag is in the trunk. My ID badge." Luca glanced at her through the rearview mirror. His stark brown eyes were calm, unreadable pools that absorbed the panic radiating from her without reflecting it back. Hedden turned the ignition key immediately. Instead, his gaze shifted to the dashboard, his fingers drumming a slow, rhythmic beat on the leather steering wheel. "Where is it parked?" he asked. His voice was low, vibrating through the quiet cabin. It wasn't a question of whether she needed the car. It was a logistical inquiry. "Sectioned near the ramp," Vanessa replied, her voice trembling. "It's the silver sedan with the dented bumper." Without a word, Lucas started the engine. The powerful vehicle purred to life, a beast waking up, and began to glide silently across the snow-dusted concrete of the rooftoplet. Vanessa watched the rows of cars pass by, her heart rate spiking with savory shadow that stretched across the pavement. She knew this was irrational. She was inside a tank of a car with Ammon, who terrified the rest of the city. But trauma didn't understand logic. Trauma told her that safety was a lie, and that the moment she lowered her guard, the blow would come. As they rounded the corner towards Section D, the headlights of the SUV swept across the concrete, illuminating the swirling snowflakes and the rows of parked vehicles. Vanessa spotted her car instantly. It was a sad, rusted thing, a relic of a life that had been falling apart for years. It sat alone near a concrete pillar, isolated from the nicer vehicles, looking abandoned. But it wasn't alone. Vanessa's breath hitched in her throat, a sharp, strangled sound that made Lily look up from her doll. "Mummy," Lily whispered. Vanessa couldn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the figure standing by the driver's side door of her sedan. He was wearing a hooded sweatshirt that had seen better days, frantic energy radiating off him even from this distance. He was trying to force a wire coat hanger through the seal of her window, his movements jerky and aggressive. "Daniel, he found us," Vanessa whispered, the blood draining from her face so fast she felt dizzy. "Oh God, he found us. How did he know?" "I didn't tell anyone where we were going." Daniel looked worse than he had the last time she saw him. He was thinner, his face gaunt, illuminated by the harsh glare of the parking lot lights. But the desperation in his posture was familiar. It was the desperation of a man who had lost everything at the tables and needed someone to bleed to make himself feel powerful again. Lucas stopped the SUV about 20 feet away. He didn't turn off Thin Jean. He didn't look surprised. He looked at Daniel with the same detached clinical interest a scientist might have for a cockroach scuttling across a hair. "Clean floor." "Stay here," Lucas said. Theckermond was absolute. He unbuckled his seatbelt, the sound loud in a tense silence. "Luca, don't." Vanessa wriggled out, her hand hovering near his shoulder, but not daring to touch the expensive fabric of his suit. "He's his erratic. He might have a knife. He gets crazy when he's like this. Just drive, please. Just drive away." Luca turned in his seat, looking at her fully, his expression soft by a fraction of a degree, but the steel behind it remained. "Lock the doors behind me, Vanessa. Luca, lock the doors." He opened the door and stepped out into the cold night. The wind caught his suit jacket, but he didn't seem to notice. He closed the door firmly, and Vanessa, Operating autopilot, immediately hit the lock button. The heavy thud of the locks engaging echoed through the car. Chas scrambled across the seat to the window, pressing her hand against the cold glass, watching the scene unfold like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Daniel hadn't noticed the SUV yet. He was too focused on his assault on Theod's sedan, cursing loudly, kicking the tire in frustration. The metal of the coat hanger snapped, and he screamed a string of obscenities that Vanessa could hear, even through the insulated glass. Luca's car. Luca walked toward him. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He worked with a predatory smoothness, his hands loose at his sides, his footsteps silent on the snow. He was a shadow detaching itself from the dark, moving with lethal intent. Daniel spun around only when Luca was 10 feet away. The sudden appearance of a man like Luca, tall, broad, radiating wealth and violence, startled him. Daniel stumbled back against the sedan, his eyes whitening. For a second, confusion reigned. He looked at Luca, then at the SUV, and then recognition dawned on his wasted face. He didn't recognize Luca Santoro, the Mafia boss. He recognized a rich man standing between him and his target. "Get lost, pal," Daniel sneered, trying to summon bravado. He straightened up, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "This is a private dispute. Walk away before you get hurt." Vanessa flinched. She wanted to scream at Daniel to run, not to save him, but because she knew what happened when people threatened Luca Santoro. She had heard the stories in high school, the rumors of what happened to the boys who keyed his car or insulted his family. Luca didn't speak. He stopped 5T from Daniel, his stillness unnerving. He was perfectly calm, a statue carved from obsidian. "I said beat it," Daniel shouted, pushing himself off the car. He reached into his pocket. Vanessa's heart stopped. She pulled Lily's head down into her lap, covering the girl's eyes. "Don't look, baby. Don't look. Is Daddy there?" Lily asked, her voice muffled against Vanessa's jeans. "No," Vanessa choked out. "Just stay down." She looked back out the window. Daniel hadn't pulled a knife. He had pulled out a screwdriver, brandishing it like a weapon. It was pathetic against a normal man. It might have been terrifying. Against Luca, it looked like a child's toy. Luca looked at the screwdriver, then up at Daniel's face. He finally spoke. Vanessa couldn't hear the words, but she saw the shape of them. Brief, cold, final. Daniel lunged. It happened so fast that Vanessa barely registered the movement. One moment, Daniel was thrusting the screwdriver forward, screaming something incoherent. The next, he was airborne. Luca didn't just dodge. He stepped inside the attack, his movement a blur of efficiency. He caught Daniel's wrist, the one holding the weapon, and twisted. Even through the glass, Vanessa Imogenjinch heard the snap. Daniel's scream was audible this time. It was a high, thin sound of agony. The screwdriver clattered to the pavement. Luca didn't stop. He didn't strike Daniel with a closed fist. He didn't dirty his knuckles. He simply used Daniel's own momentum and the leverist of the broken rest to spin him around and slam him face first into the hood of the sedan. The impact shook the old car. Dust flew up from the rusty metal. Daniel crumpled, his legs giving out, but Luca held him pinned there with one hand on the back of his neck, forcing his face into the cold metal. Vanessa was shaking uncontrollably. She had feared Daniel for 2 years. She had spent nights awake, terrified of his footsteps in the hall. And Luca had dismantled him in 3 seconds. It wasn't a fight. It was a production. Luca leaned down, bringing his mouth close to Daniel's ear. He was speaking again. Vanessa watched Daniel's struggles cease instantly. The man who had terrorized her, who had stolen her savings and bruised her ribs, went completely still, paralyzed by whatever Luca was whispering to him. After a long moment, Luca released him. He stepped back, straightening his cuffs, brushing an invisible speck of dust from his jacket. Daniel slid off the hood of the car, clutching his broken wrist to his chest. He was sobbing now, sliding down to his knees in the slush. He looked upon Luca, not with anger, but with the pure, unadulterated terror of a man who has looked into the abyss and seen something looking back. Luca pointed a single finger toward the ramp of the parking garage. Leave. Daniel didn't, that's it. He didn't look at the SUV. He didn't look for Vanessa. He scrambled to his feet, slipping on the ice, and ran. He ran like the devil himself was snapping at his heels, disappearing into the darkness of the stairwell without looking back once. Vanessa let out a breath she felt she had been holding for an hour. Her entire body sagged against the door. He was gone. Just like that, Luca stood by the empty car for a moment, watching the spot where Daniel had vanished. Then he turned and walked back to the SUV. His demeanor hadn't changed. He didn't look winded, hadn't looked angry. He looked like a man who had just taken out the trash. He opened the driver's side door and slid back in, bringing a gust of cold air with him. The atmosphere in the car shifted instantly. The silence was heavier now, charged with the violence that had just occurred. Luca, Vanessa started, her voice barely a whisper. She didn't know what to say. Thank you. Did you kill him? Are you crazy? Luca turned to look at her. His eyes were devoid of the darkness she expected. They were calm. He looked past her to Lily, who was still hiding in Vanessa's lap. Is she okay? He asked. Vanessa looked down, stroking Lily's hair. I think so. She didn't see anything. Good. Luca put the car in gear. What did you do to him? Vanessa asked, finding her courage. Luca, you broke his arm. The police, the cameras. The cameras in this garage have been malfunctioning for a week, and the company that's supposed to fix them answers to me, Luca said smoothly, pulling the SUV away from her sedan. And the police are not going to be called. Daniel isn't going to the police. He's going to find a hole tackle in two. And he's going to stay there. You don't know him. Vanessa argued weakly, though her conviction was fading. He's desperate. He owes money to bad people, Luca. He came for me because he thinks I have money hidden away. He won't stop. Luca navigated the SUV down the spiral ramp of the parking garage, his movements precise and controlled. He will stop, Luca corrected, because he doesn't owe money to bad people anymore. He owes it to me. Vanessa froze. She stared at the side of his profile, illuminated by the passing streetlights. What, $50,000? Luca said, as casually as if he were discussing the price of the doll in the back seat. That's the principal sum plus the vigorous he racked up with the Calibra brothers in Jersey. I bought his note this morning. You paid his it? Vanessa felt the room spinning. $50,000. It was an impossible sum. It was more money than she had seen in her entire life. Why? Why would you do that? Luca brought the car to a stop at the exit gate. He turned to her, fully now, his expression intense. I didn't pay it for him, Vanessa. I bought the debt. That means I own the debt. And by extension, I own him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pack of cigarettes, tapping one out, but not lighting it. Just rolling it between his fingers as a nervous tick he seemed to be suppressing. As long as he owes me that money, Luca continued, his voice dropping an octave. He is property, and me property does not touch what belongs to me. The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. What belongs to him? He wasn't talking about money. He was talking about her, about Lily. We're in property, Luca, Vanessa whispered, a flash of her old spirit returning. We aren't things. You can buy to settle a score. No, Luca agreed softly. He looked at her with a strange sadness in his eyes that confused her more than his violence. You aren't property. You are collateral damage of a life you didn't choose, and I am removing you from the blast radius. He accelerated, merging onto the highway that led toward the skyline of the city, toward the glittering towers where men like Luca lived above the clouds. Mika, Vanessa said, realizing they were leaving it behind. My scrubs, my ID. I'll have someone pick it up tonight, Luca dismissed. They'll clean it, service it, and bring your things to Thiepen House. But you won't be driving that death trap again. Penthouse, Vanessa asked, gripping the door handle. Luca, I can't go to your penthouse. I have a job. I have a shift at 7 o'clock. A.M. I have a life, messy as it is. You have a stalker who just tried to break into your car with a screwdriver, Luque countered. You have a child who asked Santa for food. Your life is currently a target practice for disaster. You are coming with me tonight. Tomorrow we can discuss your shift. Tonight you sleep somewhere where the doors lock properly. Vanessa looked back at Lily. The little girl had sat up now that the car was moving. She was looking out the window. At the city lights, clutching the doll. She looked peaceful. She didn't look like a child who was afraid of hunger or angry fathers. Vanessa slumped back against the seat. She was too tired to fight him. And God help her, a Parther. The part that had been carrying the weight of the world for 2 years. Didn't want to fight him. She wanted to let him take the wheel. She wanted to believe that the steel in his voice could actually keep the monsters away. Just for tonight, Vanessa murmured more to herself than to him. Just for tonight, Luca lied. She knew he was lying. He knew she knew, but neither of them called it out. The drive was silent after that. The city blurred past them, a streak of neon and shadow. Vanessa watched Luca's hands on the steering wheel. They were large, strong hands. There was no blood. On them, no sign of the violence he had just inflicted. He drove with a gentle touch, adjusting thermometer control when he heard Lily sneeze in the back seat. The duality of him was dizzying. The monster who broke bones without blinking, and the man who turned up the heat for a child he barely knew. They arrived at his building 20 minutes later. It wasn't just an apartment building. It was a glass needle piercing the sky, a fortress of wealth and exclusion. The valet rushed to open the door before the SUV even came to a complete stop. "Mr. Santoro," the valet said, bowing his head. He looked at Vanessa, and the child was surprised but masked it quickly. "Shall he take the bags?" "Leave them?" Luca said. He stepped out and came around to Vanessa, offering her his hand. She looked at it. It was a crossroads. Taking his hand meant stepping into his world. It meant accepting that she was no longer just Vanessa Grant, nurse and single mother. It meant becoming something else, something protected, something kept. She looked at Lily, who was already scrambling out of the car, clutching the doll. "Wow," Lily breathed, looking up at the building. "It touches the moon." Luca smiled. A real, small smile that transformed his harsh face. "Almost, Piccolina, little one. Almost." Vanessa took his hand. His grip was warm and firm. He pulled her out of the car, and for a moment she stumbled, her legs weak from the adrenaline crash. He caught her instantly, his arm going around her waist to steady her. He held her there for a beat longer than necessary, his body a solid wall of heat against hers. "I've got you," he whispered into her hair. "You can stop shaking now, Vanessa. I've got you." They walked into the lobby, a cavern of marble and gold. The concierge nodded respectfully. They entered the private elevator that required a biometric scan of Luca's hand open. As they ascended, the pressure in Vanessa's ears popped, marking theotitude. When the doors opened directly into the penthouse, Vanessa gasped. It was vast. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city covered in snow. It was beautiful, cold, and immaculate. It looked like a museum, not a home. "Make yourselves comfortable," Luca said, closing the elevator doors behind them, sealing them in. "I'll order food. Lily, what do you like? Pizza, pasta." "Pizza," Lily shouted, her fear completely forgotten in the face of luxury and the promise of food. "Pizza it is," Luca said, pulling his phone from his pocket. Vanessa stood in the middle of the living room, still wearing his coat. She felt like an imposter, shuffled like she had stepped through the looking glass. But as she watched Luca Santoro, the most dangerous man Sheck knew, kneel down to show Lily how to turn on the massive television, she realized that the danger wasn't inside Isa's room. The danger was out there in the cold, with Daniel and the debts and the hunger. In here, there was only warmth. And for the first time in a very long time, Vanessa allowed herself to unclench her fists. She was safe. She didn't know for how long. And she didn't know the price. But tonight, she was safe. "Mummy, look." Lily pointed at the screen. "Cartoons." Vanessa smiled. A genuine, tired smile. She walked over to the massive sectional sofa and sat down. Luca finished his call and looked at her from across the room. Their eyes met. There was a history there, unspoken, and heavy, spanning from the chemistry lab of their youth to this glass castle in the sky. "Thank you," she mouthed. Luca nodded once, a sharp, singular motion. He didn't say, "You're welcome." He didn't say, "It's nothing." He just turned and walked toward the kitchen, rolling up the sleeves of his shirt, revealing the powerful forearms that had built an empire and broken a man's wrist for her sake. The night was just beginning, and Vanessa had the sinking feeling that her life had just been irrevocably altered. She wasn't just a guest here. She was the reason the king had come down from his tower. And kings, she knew, rarely let their prizes go. But as she watched Lily laugh at the cartoon, belly full of the promise of pizza, Vanessa decided that maybe, just maybe, being a prize was better than being a victim. She pulled Luca's coat tighter around herself, inhaling hissant, and let the city lights blur into a sea of stars below them. The past was at the gate. Yes, but the gate was locked, and Lucas Santoro held the key. The silence in the penthouse was not the empty, terrifying silence Vanessa had grown accustomed to over the last 2 years. It was not the silence of holding one's breath, waiting for a key to turn in a lock or a heavy footstep to creak on a floorboard. This was a heavy, expensive silence. It smelled of polished mahogany, fresh linen, and the faint grounding scent of espresso that seemed to permeate the air regardless of the time of day. Daisha had passed since Luca Santoro had pulled her out of the snow and into his fortress in the sky. For 8 hours. To Vanessa, it felt like a lifetime had been compressed into those minutes. Lily was sleeping in a room that was larger than their entire previous apartment. Surrounded by so many pillows, looked like a princess in a storybook. And Vanessa was standing in a kitchen that cost more than she would in 10 lifetimes, staring at a stainless steel refrigerator as if it were an alien artifact. She tightened the sash of the silk robe that had been left in her room. It was navy blue, soft as water against her skin, and it made her feel like an imposter. She shouldn't be here. She shouldn't be comfortable. Comfort was a trap. Comfort made you slow, and being slow got you hurt. "I have to do something," she whispered to herself, the sound of her own voice startling her in the quiet morning light. She couldn't pay him. The thought of the $50,000 he had spent to buy Daniel's debt sat on her chest like a concrete block. She couldn't give him money, but she could be useful. She could prove that she wasn't a leech, just another person taking from him. She'd panned the refrigerator. It was stocked with military precision. Rows of organic eggs, imported cheeses, cartons of milk, fresh berries, and vegetables that looked like they had been polished before being shelved. She grabbed the eggs, the flour, the milk. She found a heavy, ceramic bowl and a whisk. Cooking. She could do cooking. It was mechanical, rhythmic, and safe. She began to whisk the batter, the repetitive clink, clink, clink of the metal against the ceramic serving as an anchor for her racing thoughts. She was safe here. Daniel was gone. Luca had said so. But why did she feel like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop? Why did she feel like every bite of food she ate was adding to a tab she could never settle? She was so focused on the swirl of flour and milk that she didn't hear him enter. Luca didn't walk. He materialized. One moment the room was empty, and the next the air pressure shifted, becoming charged and heavy. "You are not staff, Vanessa." His voice was rough with sleep, a low rumble that vibrated through the marble floor and straight up her spine. Vanessa jumped, nearly dropping the bowl. She spun around, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Luca was leaning against the doorframe of the kitchen, watching her. He looked different in feminine light. She couldn't pay him. The thought of the $50,000 he had spent to buy Daniel's debt sat on her chest like a concrete block. She couldn't give him money, but she could be useful. She could prove that she wasn't a leech, just another person taking. From him she opened the refrigerator. It was stocked with military precision. Rows of Organis eggs, imported cheeses, cartons of milk, fresh berries, and vegetables that looked like they had been polished before being shelved. She grabbed the eggs, the flour, the milk. She found a heavy ceramic bowl and a whisk. Cooking. She could do cooking. It was mechanical, rhythmic, and safe. She began to whisk the batter, the repetitive clink, clink, clink of the metal against the ceramic serving as an anchor for her racing thoughts. She was safe here. Daniel was gone. Luca had said so. But why did she feel like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop? Why did she feel like every bite of food she ate was adding to a tab she could never settle? She was so focused on the swirl of flour and milk that she didn't hear him enter. Luca didn't walk. He materialized. One moment the room was empty, and the next the air pressure shifted, becoming charged and heavy. "You are not stat, Vanessa." His voice was rough with sleep, a low rumble that vibrated through the marble floor and straight up her spine. Vanessa jumped, nearly dropping the bowl. She spun around, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Luca was leaning against the door frame of the kitchen, watching her. He looked different in the morning light. Theomore of the three-piece suit was gone, replaced by dark grey sweatpants and a fitted black t-shirt that clung to his chest and arms. His hair was messy, stripped of the severe styling gel, falling over his forehead in a way that made him look younger. Dangerous, yes, but human. I know, Vanessa stammered, gripping the whisk like a weapon. "I just wanted to make breakfast too." "Say thank you. You have all this food and the housekeeper hasn't come yet." "So I thought the housekeeper comes at 9 o'clock, Luca interrupted, pushing off the doorframe and walking toward her. "And you are not here to cook for me. You are here to rest." "I can't just rest, Luca," she argued, turning back to the stove to pour the batter onto the hot griddle. "I'm not a porcelain doll. You've given us so much in 2 days. Let me make pancakes. It's the least I can do." Luca stopped right behind her. He was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough to smell the soap he used, something clean and sharp like cedar. He reached out, his hand large and warm, and covered hers where she gripped the handle of the pan. He didn't take it from her. He just stopped her movement. "The least you can do," he murmured, his breath brushing the top of her head, "is stop acting like you owe me a debt. Debts are for business." "This is not business," Vanessa froze. The intimacy of the moment was overwhelming. "It feels like a debt." Shui spurred, her voice trembling. $50,000. The clothes. This place. I don't know how to be this. I don't know how to be a guest in a life I can't afford. I keep waiting for the bill, Luca. Because there is always a bill. He gently took the spatula from her hand and set it on the counter. Then, with a pressure that was firm but incredibly gentle, had turned her around to face him. His dark eyes searched hers, stripping away her defenses with terrifying efficiency. "Do you remember 11th grade?" he asked suddenly. Vanessa blinked, thrown off balance by the change in subject. "What, 11th grade?" "Mr. Henderson's chemistry class. Second semester." A faint, confused smile touched Vanessa's lips. "I remember. You blew up a beaker. You put too much potassium in the solution." "I did," Luca acknowledged, a hint of Femismit dancing in his dark eyes, softening the hard lines of his face. And everyone laughed. The jocks, the cheerleaders, even the teacher made a joke about explosive personalities. They all laughed at the clumsy mob kid. Everyone except you. Vanessa looked down at his chest, unable to hold the intensity of his gaze. "You had glass in your hand. You were bleeding. It didn't seem funny to me." "You came over," Luca continued, his voice dropping to a hush that made the vast kitchen feel very small. "You ignored the teacher, telling everyone to stay back. You took my hand. You pulled out the shard of glass and you wrapped it with a tissue from your pocket. You asked if I was okay. You didn't look at me like I was a monster or a criminal in training. You looked at me like I was just a boy who was hurt." He placed a finger under her chin, tilting her head up until she was forced to look at him again. The morning sun caught the flexes of gold in his brown eyes. "That was the first time anyone outside my family had touched me with kindness," he said, the confession raw and heavy. "I watched you for 2 years after that. I saw you walk through the holes trying to be invisible, hiding behind your books, but you were never invisible to me. You were the only color in a grey world, Vanessa." Vanessa's breath hitched. She had assumed he helped her in the mall because he was powerful and she was pathetic. A charity case to make himself feel benevolent. She hadn't realized that she had been carrying a piece of his history with Harold this time. "I knew who you were," she admitted softly. "Everyone said to stay away from the Santoro kid. They said your family was dangerous. They said you would hurt anyone who got too close. I was dangerous." Lucas said simply, "I am dangerous." "Not to me," she countered, their realization surprising her as she spoke it. "You were never dangerous to me." "No," he agreed, his thumb brushing her cheekbone a touch so light it felt like a ghost. "Never to you." The moment hung suspended in time, fragile and beautiful. Vanessa felt a pull toward him, a magnetic force that defied her logic. She was a struggling nurse with a chaotic past. He was a kingpin who roulette the city from the shadows. But in this kitchen, with the smell of pancakes and coffee, none of that seemed to matter. Mummy, pancakes. The spell shattered as Lily came bounding into the kitchen, clutching her giant doll by one arm. She was wearing a pair of pajamas, Luque, had ordered for her, soft pink flannel with clouds on them. She looked rested, her cheeks flushed with sleep, the dark circles under her eyes fading. Lucas stepped back instantly, creating a respectable distance between them, but the warmth in his eyes didn't fade as he looked at the child. "Good morning, Piccolina," he said, his voice shifting from intense to playful. "Your mother made pancakes. But only if you wash your hands first." "Okay." Lily dropped Thedo on a velvet chair and scrambled toward the sink. Luca grabbed a stool and moved it over so she could reach the faucet, turning on the water for her and handing her the soap. Vanessa watched them, her heart aching in her chest. It was a domestic scene she had stopped dreaming of years ago. A father figure, a warm kitchen, safety. It weighs for her things she wanted, and that made it terrifying because if she let herself want it, losing it would kill her. They ate at the kitchen island. Luca ate 3 pancakes, praising Vanessa's cooking with a seriousness that made her blush. He listened intently as Lily described a dream she had about a flying reindeer who ate pizza. He didn't check his phone. He didn't look distracted. He gave them his undivided attention. Agif more expensive than the penthouse itself, but the real world has a way of intruding on even the highest towers. As he were finishing up, a soft, urgent chime echoed through the room. Luca's expression shifted instantly. Thay's offness vanished, replaced by the granite mask of the dawn. He pulled a phone from his pocket, not the one used for food orders, but a sleek black device with no brand markings. He glanced at the screen and his jaw tightened. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10. "Excuse me," he said, standing up abruptly. "I have to take this. Stay here. Relax." He walked out of the kitchen and down the long hallway toward his office, closing the heavy oak door behind him with a definitive click. Vanessa watched him go, a cold draft settling over her heart. The transition was jarring. 1 minute he was Luca the boy who remembered a tissue in chemistry class. The next, he was the boss, answering a call that probably involved things she didn't want to know about. Inside the soundproof office, Lucan swore. "The phone. Speak. We have a problem, boss." Bruno's voice came through, tense and clipped. "We tossed Daniel's apartment like you asked. It's clean. Too clean, but we've found something else. Or rather, someone else found it first." Luca walked behind his massive desk and stared out at the city skyline. The snow was falling again, covering the grime of the streets in white. The place was turned over before we got there, Bruno said. "Professional job. They were looking for something specific. Floorboards ripped up, vents unscrewed, and we found a tag on the doorframe. A marker." "Which family?" Luca asked, his hand tightening Garand the phone until the plastic creaked. "Andrangheta," Bruno replied. "Thecca Librisi." Faction Luca cursed silently. The Andrangheta were not low-level thugs like Daniel. They were organized, ruthless, and they were rivals of the Santoro family. They didn't care about rules, and they didn't care about collateral damage. "Why are they interested in a junkie like Daniel?" Luca demanded. "He owed them money." "Yes, but you don't tear an apartment apart for cash. You break legs for cash. Tearing a place apart means you are looking for information. It's not cash," Bruno said, his voice dropping lower. "Word on the street is that Daniel stole a ledger from one of their front operations 3 months ago. He thought he could blackmail them. He's been hiding it. And let me guess, Luca said, his eyes narrowing as he watched a snowflake hit the glass window. They can't find Daniel. So they think the ex-wife has it. Bruno finished. They think. Vanessa knows where it is, or that she has it. We intercepted chatter on an encrypted line. They know she's with you, Luque. They know you picked her up at the mall. They think you have the ledger now. They think you made a move against him by taking. Luca slammed his fist onto the mahogany desk. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. This changed everything. It wasn't just about protecting Vanette from an abusive ex anymore. She was now a pawn in a Mafia war. If the Ndrangheta she had their secrets, they wouldn't stop until they had her. "Where is Daniel?" Luca asked, his voice deadly calm. "In. The wind. We're tracking him, but he's gone underground. Heparobli sold the information about Vanessa to them to buy himself time." "Find him," Luca ordered. "Find him and bring him to the warehouse. I want to know exactly what he stole and who he told. And Bruno? Yes, boss. Tied in the perimeter around the penthouse. I want 3 more men in the lobby and 2 on the roof. Number. 1 gets within 100 yards of this building without me knowing their blood type. Understood. Should I tell the girl? Warn her. She needs Tokno. The threat level has changed." Luca paused. He looked at the closed door of his office. He thought about Vanessa in the kitchen, flipping pancakes, finally smiling after years of terror. He thought about how she flinched at loud noises. If he told her that a ruthless criminal organization was hunting her, the fragile peace she had found would shatter. She would panic. She might try to run to protect him or Lily. She would start looking at the exits again. "No," Luca said firmly. "She knows about Daniel. She thinks he is the only threat. Let her believe that. I will handle the Ndrangheta. She doesn't need to carry that weight. I will be thrall. Is that wise, Luca?" "If she goes out, she isn't going out," Luca said. "She stays here until I wipe the Calibrasi family off the map." He hung up. He stood there for a moment, adjusting his cuffs, composing his face. He had to go back out there and play the role of the benevolent protector while silently preparing for war. When he returned to the living room, Vanessa was sitting on the sofa, folding a pile of laundry that the housekeeping staff had left. She looked up at him, her blue eyes scanning his face for danger. She was perceptive. Too perceptive. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Fine," Luke keeled smoothly. "Just business. Minor complications with a shipment at the docks." He sat down in the arm, her trying to radiate calm. "Vanessa, we need to discuss the arrangements. I want you and Lily Toast inside the penthouse for the next few days. I have everything you need here. I can bring in tutors for Lily, anything you want. I have a gym. A library. You don't need to leave." Vanessa stopped folding a shirt. Her hands went still. "Stay inside." "For how long?" "Until I say it's safe," Luca said. "Safe from Daniel?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "You said you bought his debt. You said you owned him. If he's handled, why do we need to hide?" Luca Menela cursed her sharp mind. "Daniel is handled, but desperate. Men do stupid things. I want to be sure he has left state before you resume your routine." Vanessa bit her lip. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city she was being asked to hide from. "I can't, Luca. I have a shift tomorrow at the hospital. I already called in sick for 2 days. If I don't show up tomorrow, I lose my job. I lose my seniority. I lose the only thing that is mine. I will pay you double your salary, Luca said, frustration leaking into his voice. Triple. You don't need that job. You don't need to scrub floor sand, deal with sick people for pennies. Vanessa turned around, her eyes flashing with a sudden fire. It's not about the money. It's about my life. For 2 years, Daniel controlled where I went, who I saw, what I spent. I clawed that job back. I fought for it. It's the one place where I'm not a victim, where I'm a nurse who saves children. If I give that up, if I just sit here in your golden tower eating your food, then I'm just trading one cage for another. Few words hung in the air, one cage for another. Luque felt a sharp pang in his chest. He stood up and walked over to her. He wanted to shake her, to tell her that the cage was the only thing keeping the wolves out. But he looked at her face, the determination, the fear of losing herself, and he knew he couldn't force her. I am not Daniel, he said intensely. I am not trying to control you. I am trying to keep you alive. Igno, Vanessa said, her voice softening. She reached out and touched his arm, a bold move. I know you're not him. But please, Luca, let me go to work. It's the pediatric ward. It's secure. You can have your driver take me. You can have a guard. Stand at the door, but let me keep my life. Please, if I hide here, Daniel wins. Fear wins. Luca looked down at her. He saw the desperation in her eyes, the need to retain some shred of agency. He knew logically that the safest place for her was in this room, but he also knew that breaking her spirit was a different kind of violence. And he was arrogant. He was Luca Santoro. He controlled this city. Surely he could protect one woman at a hospital for 8 hours. He had an army. The Andranga told dare strike in a public hospital in broad daylight. They were shadows, not terrorists. They wanted the ledger. Not a public spectacle. He made a calculation, a dangerous one. Fine, Luca said, the word feeling heavy on his tongue. You go to work tomorrow. Vanessa let out a breath of relief, her shoulders sagging. Thank you. Thank you, Luca. But he raised to finger his expression. Severe my terms. You take my car. You take my driver. And you take a shadow, a bodyguard. He will be dressed in plain clothes. He will sit in the waiting room. He will check the exits. You do not go to the bathroom without texting him. You do not go to the cafeteria alone. If anything feels wrong, you press the panic button I will give you and I will be there in 5 minutes with enough firepower to level the building. If the hospital's alarm starts screaming, don't stop to think. Get to the nearest stairwell and get behind a locked door. Do. You understand? Vanessa nodded vigorously. I understand. I can do that. It's just the pediatric floor. It's mostly worried mums and sick kids. It's safe. It's not safe, Luca thought grimly. Nothing is safe. But Heckle didn't tell her that. Not without revealing the lie he had just constructed. Okay, Luca said. Tomorrow you go to work. He watched her smile. A real, genuine smile of gratitude, and felt a knot of dread tightened in his stomach. He was giving her what she wanted, but he was exposing her. He would have to double the guard. He would put his best men on the perimeter. I need to make some calls, Luca said, stepping back from her warmth. To arrange the security detail. Okay, Vanessa said. She hesitated, then stood on her tiptoes and kissed his cheek. It was a chaste deed, quick touch, but it burned his skin like a brand. Thank you for not making me invisible again. Luca watched her walk back to the couch to sit with Lily. He touched his cheek where her lips had brushed his skin. He walked back to his office, his mind racing with tactical layouts at the hospital. He would burn the world down before he let anything up into her. But as he sat behind his desk and pulled up the schematics of the city, he couldn't shake the feeling Faith had just made a mistake. A mistake born of a desire to see her smile. He dialed Bruno again. Change of plans, Lucas said, his voice like ice. She's going to the hospital tomorrow. I want Ghost Team active. I want eyes on every doctor, every janitor, every delivery truck. If anyone who smells like olive oil and gunpowder steps within a mile of that hospital, I want them put in. The ground? It's risky, boss, Bruno warned. I know, Luca whispered, looking through the glass door at Vanessa, laughing with her daughter. But she needs to fly, so we will be the net. The sun began to seat over the city, casting long shadows across the penthouse. To Vanessa, the sunset looked like a painting of freedom. To Luca, it looked like blood spreading across the sky. He checked. Hiskin in the holster, ensuring a round was chambered. The war was coming, and tomorrow he was letting his heart walk right onto the battlefield. The pediatric ward of St. Mary's Hospital smelled of antiseptic floor wax and theffant sweet scent of bubblegum fluoride. To most people, it was a smell that induced anxiety, a reminder of illness and fragility. To Vanessa Grant, it was the perfume of Normally. It was the Centef, the one place in the world where she knew the rules, where she had authority and where her actions directly resulted in healing rather than survival. She walked down the corridor, her sneakers squeaking softly on the linoleum. Shuaz wearing her favorite blue scrubs, the ones with the cartoon whales on the pocket, and her ID badge was clipped securely to her chest. Outwardly, she was Nurse Grant. The senior Chiffle could find a vein in a dehydrated infant on the first try. Inwardly, she was a woman vibrating with a frequency of terror so high it felt like a hum in her teeth. You're doing great, Van, Shu whispered to herself, adjusting the stethoscope around her neck. Just a shift, 8 hours, then back to Theffatris. She glanced toward the waiting room at the end of the hall. A man was sitting there reading a magazine about golf. He was wearing a beige corduroy jacket and generic jeans. He looked like he, a bored father, waiting for a tonsillectomy consultation. But Vanessa knew better. He was the Shadow, a man named Elias, whom Luca had introduced to her that morning. Elias didn't look at her, but she knew he clocked her every movement. Every time she turned a corner, he shifted his position. Every time a delivery person entered the floor, Elias's hand drifted imperceptibly to his waist. It was suffocating. It was necessary. The morning had been a blur of routine. Handover rounds, medication, distribution, updating charts. Vanessa threw herself into the work with a desperate hunger. She checked temperatures, soothed crying toddlers, and joked with the exhausted parents. For hours, she managed to forget about the penthouse, the debt, and the man with the dark eyes who was currently paying for her safety. She managed to forget Daniel, but the fear was a patient predator. It waited forth quiet moments. At 11:30 a.m., the ward quieted down for lunch. The doctors retreated to their offices, and the hum of activity slowed. Vanessa felt the adrenaline crash hitting her. Her hands, steady as rocks while inserting an IV, began to tremble slightly when she reached for a pen. "Hey, Vanessa." Sarah, one of the junior nurses, called out from the station. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Go take a break." Elk over the desk. "I'm fine, Sarah," Vanessa lied, forcing a smile. "You're pale, and you've checked the emergency exit sign 4 times in the last hour," Sarah noted gently. "Go get coffee. Sit down for 10 minutes. Vanessa nodded, realizing her paranoia was leaking out. "Okay, 10 minutes." She signaled to Elias in the waiting room. A subtle tug on her earlobe. The signal Luca had taught her. Elias nodded almost imperceptibly and stood up, meandering down the hall toward the vending machines near Thebrick room. He was good. He was invisible. The break room was a small box tucked away near the service elevators. It contained a round table, a flickering fluorescent light, and a coffee machine that produced a sludge that tasted like battery acid. It was empty. Vanessa walked in and exhaled, leaning back against the closed door for a second. She fished her phone out of her pocket. No messages from Luca, just a blank screen. She pressed a side button to ensure it was working. The panic button app he had installed was right there on the home screen, a red icon that looked like a shield. "Press it if anything feels wrong," he had said. Vanessa's thumb hovered for half a heartbeat. Then she tapped the red shield once, silent, deliberate, and locked her phone before sliding it back into her pocket. No siren, no light show, just a single muted vibration against her palm. "Everything feels wrong," she thought. "My ex-husband is being hunted by the mob and I'm living in a penthouse with a crime lord." She pushed off the door and went to the counter. She needed caffeine. She needed to wake up and finish this shift so she could go back to Lily. As the coffee machine gurgled and hissed, the door to the break room opened. Vanessa didn't turn immediately. "Coffee's fresh, but it still smells like burnt rubber," she joked, assuming it was Sarah or Dr. Evans. There was no laughter, no response, just the sound off door clicking shut and the distinct snick of the lock turning. Vanessa's blood froze. The lock on the break room door had been broken for 6 months. You had to jiggle it violently to get it to engage. Whoever had just locked it hadn't so with a key or a very specific tool. She turned slowly, her hand instinctively going to her pocket where she kept her trauma shears and a small sealed scalpel she had confiscated from a tray earlier, a habit she had picked up when living with Daniel. 2 men stood in the room. They were dressed in scrubs, green surgical scrubs, generic and crisp. They wore surgical masks pulled down under their chins, revealing faces that were utterly forgettable. Average height, average build, brown hair. They looked like agency nurses sent to fill a staffing gap. But Vanessa was Anos. She spent 12 hours a day looking at people in scrubs, and she saw Theo's instantly. The man on the left was wearing a watch, a heavy gold Rolexer that caught the flickering light. Nurses didn't wear heavy metal watches. They harbored bacteria and scratched patients. The man on the right was looking at the coffee machine with confusion, as if he had never seen a communal pot before, but it was their shoes that made Vanessa's stomach drop through the floor. Nurses wore Hoka's, Dancio's, Brooks, shoes designed for 12 hours of standing on concrete. Shoestat were ugly, functional, and rubber-soled. These men were wearing leather loafers, expensive Italian leather loafers with hard soles, the kind of shoes that cost $1,000 and offered zero arch support. "Can I help you?" Vanessa asked, her voice steady despite the screaming in her head. "This is a slovenly area. The agency orientation is on the 3rd floor." The man with the Rolex smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who had cornered a rabbit. "We aren't with the agency, Mrs. Grant," he said. His accent was faint, but it was there. European, not the rough, slurred speech of Daniel's gambling buddies. This was precise. "It's sums," Grant Vanessa corrected, her fingers wrapping around the handle of the scalpel in her pocket. "And if you are into agency, you need to leave. Security is just outside." The man in the corduroy occurred. The second man spoke. Up, his voice bored. "He's currently dealing with a cardiac event in the waiting room. Avery, sudden, very fatal overdose. He won't be joining us." Vanessa felt Thurham's spin. Elias. They had killed Elias. Or incapacitated him. This wasn't Daniel. Daniel was a thug who threw lamps. These men were operators. "What do you want?" Vanessa asked, backing up until her hips hit the counter. Thekafy pot was behind her, steaming hot. "We want the book," Rolex said, taking a step forward. "The ledger your husband stole. We know you have it. We know Santora has you. So, we're going to take you. And then Santora was going to give us the book to get you back." Simple geometry. "I don't know what you're talking about," Vanessa said, her voice arising. "I don't have a book. Daniel is a liar. He doesn't have anything." "Every honor has a price," the man said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a syringe. "We can do this quietly." "Vanessa, you walk out with us. We say you felt sick. Or we can do it the hard way." Vanessa didn't think. She didn't weigh the options. The Lissard brain that had kept her alive through 2 years of domestic abuse took over. She grabbed the pot of coffee. It was full. It was scalding. She didn't hesitate. She swung the glass calf, withdled her strength, splashing the boiling liquid in a wide arc directly at their faces. The man on the right screamed, clutching his eyes as the hot liquid seared his skin. The calf shattered against his shoulder, spraying glass and coffee everywhere. Rolex was faster. He ducked, taking the liquid on his arm, but the distraction bored Vanessa a second. She didn't run for the door. They were blocking it. She ran for the other exit, the service door that led to the linen chute and the back stairwell. It was usually locked from the outside, but she had a master key card. "Get her," Rolex shouted, shaking the coffee off his arm. Vanessa swiped her badge. "Red light, denial, damn it," she screamed, swiping again. Rolex lunged. He grabbed her scrub top, yanking her back. Vanessa spun around, the scalpel already in her hand. She slashed out blindly, a desperate, feral strike. The blade caught him on the forearm, slicing through the surgical scrub and into the skin. He hissed in pain and released her, looking at the blood welling up with genuine surprise. "You bitch," he growled. The fire alarm exploded into life. It wasn't just a siren. It was a deafening, strobing assault on the senses. Hoop, poop, poop. Their sprinklers didn't go off, but the emergency lights began to flash. Luque Vanessa knew it instantly. He was watching. He had seen the panic button activation, or he was watching the cameras. The noise disoriented the men for a fraction of a second. Vanessa kicked the man with the burned face in the knee hard and swiped her card again. Green light. She threw herself through the heavy metal door and slammed it shut, engaging the deadbolt. From thine side, just as a heavy body slammed against it. She was in the service corridor. It was dark, smelling of dirty laundry and dust. It was under renovation, a maze of plastic tarps and exposed drywall. Think, Vanessa. No, Luca corrected her, his voice fierce. You are the prize, and I didn't share. The helicopter began its descent toward a large estate on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by high walls and dense forest. It looked cold, isolated, and safe. Vanessa closed her eyes. She had wanted a normal shift. She had wanted to be a nurse. Instead, she had become a survivor of a war she didn't understand. But as she felt Luca's thumb stroking the back of her hand, she realized she wasn't just a survivor. She was a partner. She had fought back. She hadn't frozen. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to serve what was coming next. The Andine Jetta. Wanted a fight? They were about to find out that Vanessa Grant wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was the woman who stood next to the devil. And she'd learned how to hold a scalpel. The dress lay on the bed like a pool of spilled wine. It was a deep, rich burgundy velvet, heavy and soft, catching the dim light of the safe-house bedroom. With a predatory gleam, it wasn't just a garment. It was a statement. It was the color of royalty, of power, and of blood. Vanessa Grant stood before it wrapped in a towel, her hair still damp from the shower. The steam from the bathroom had faded, leaving the air cool and crisp, but her skin felt hot. 2 days had passed since the hospital attack. 2 days of hiding in this fortified estate, surrounded by dense forest and armed guards. To Daisif, watching Luca pace the hallways like a caged tiger, coordinating a war from his encrypted phone. Tonight, the Cold War would turn hot. She reached out and touched the fabric. It was cool against the fingertips. This was the armor Luca had chosen for her. Tonight was the Santoro Winter Gala, the most exclusive event on the city's social calendar. Usually, it was a night for charity and networking. Tonight, it was a trap. Are you ready? Vanessa turned. Luca was standing in the doorway. He was already dressed in a tuxedo that fit him with lethal precision. The black wool absorbed the light, making his white shirt and black bow tie pop in stark contrast. He looked devastatingly handsome, but it was the beauty of a weapon, sleek, dark, and designed to end things. I don't know, Vanessa admitted, her voice steady despite the flutter in her stomach. Is Lilius asleep? Luca cut in gently, stepping into the room. Maria is with her. There are 2 guards outside her door and 1 on the balcony. The safe. House is on lockdown. No one gets in nor out until wear it on. She is safer here than she would be in the president's bunker. Vanessa exhaled, nodding. Okay, then I'm ready. You haven't put on the dress, Luca noted, his dark brown eyes sweeping over her form with a heaviness that made her clutch the towel tighter. I was just looking at it. It's beautiful, Luca, but it's a lot. It needs to be, he said, walking over to the bed. He picked up the dress, the velvet draping over his large hands. Tonight, you are nothing. For 2 years, you made yourself small to survive, Daniel. You wore grey. You walked in the shadows. Tonight, we end that. Tonight you walk into Thelion's den wearing red, and you show them that you belong to the only lion. That matters. He held the dress out to her. It was a challenge and a promise. Vanessa dropped the towel. She didn't away. She had seen the way he looked at her in the kitchen, the way he held her on the roof. Modesty felt like Erislick from a past life. She stepped into the dress, pulling the heavy velvet up her body. It fit like a second skin, hugging her curves, the long sleeves elegant, the neckline plunging just enough to be daring without revealing too much. Lucas stepped behind her. His hands brushed her bare back as he pulled the zipper up. The sound was a sharpness in the quiet room. He didn't pull away when it was done. He rested his hands on her shoulders, leaning down until his cheek brushed against her ear. "You look like a queen," he whispered. "My queen." Vanessa looked at their reflection in the mirror. The nurse in the scrubs was gone. The victim was gone. The woman staring back was dangerous. She wore the color of blood, and she stood next to the devil himself. "Let's go catch a monster," she said. The drive to the city was silent. Thermod limousine moved through the slushy streets like a shark through dark water. Vanessa sat next to Luca, her hand resting in his. His grip was firm, grounding. He was checking his phone periodically, reading messages that vanished as soon as he saw them. "Victoria is there," Lucas said, breaking the silence as the city skyline rose up to meet them. "He arrived 10 minutes ago. He thinks he's there to accept an award for Philanthropist of the Year. The irony is not lost on me." "And the Andronetta?" Vanessa asked. "They are embedded. Waiters, valet, guests. They think they are the hunters tonight. They think I am weak because I have been hiding you. They think I will be distracted. Will you be?" Luca turned to her. The passing streetlights illuminated the sharp angles of his face. "Distracted? No. Motivated? Yes, when we walk through those doors. Vanessa, you stay on my left. Always on my left. That keeps my gun hand free." Vanessa nodded, glancing at the bulge under his jacket that was invisible to anyone who didn't know it was there. "What is the signal?" "I will ask you to dance," Lucas said. "The second dance, the waltz. That is when the trap springs." The car slowed. They had arrived. Thevenue was a massive historic hotel in Midtown. Its facade bathed in golden light. A red carpet stretched up the steps, flanked by shivering photographers and eager paparazzi. This was the public face of the Mafia. Legitimacy, wealth, glamour. The chauffeur opened the door. The cold air hit Vanessa instantly, biting at her exposed neck, but she didn't shiver. Sheshkanaled every ounce of strength she had left. Luca stepped out first. The flashbulbs erupted like a lightning storm. He ignored them, buttoning his jacket, and turned to offer her his hand. Vanessa took it. She stepped out onto the red carpet. The reaction was immediate. A hush rippled through the press line, followed by a franto-synchriase and the clicking of shutters. The media knew Lucas Santoro was a recluse. They knew he was single. Seeing him arrive with a woman, a stunning woman in burgundy velvet, was the scoop of the year. "Keep your head up," Lucchemi read, his voice barely moving his lips as he guided her forward. "Look at them like you own the cameras. Look at them like you're bored." Vanessa lifted her chin. She thought of Daniel cowering in the parking lot. She thought of the men in the hospital stairwell. She wasn't afraid of cameras. Who-ish? A reporter shouted, "Mr. Santoro," a name. Luca didn't stop. He placed his hand on the small of her back, a possessive claim that the entire world could see. He guided her up the stairs, past the velvet ropes, and into the warmth of the grand ballroom. Inside, the noise of the city was replaced by the swell of a string quartet and the murmur of 1,000 wealthy voices. The room was a sea of black tuxedos and glittering gowns. Crystal, chandelier size of small cars hung from the ceiling. It smelled of expensive perfume, champagne, and power. "Stay close," Luca said, his eyes scanning the room. He wasn't looking at the decor. He was counting heads. He was identifying threats. Vanessa scanned Therum too. She saw men who looked like politicians, women who looked like models, and men who looked like sharks in human skin. "There, Luca," whispered. Vanessa followed his gaze. Across their room, near the open bar, stood a man in a white tuxedo jacket. He was older, with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He was laughing, holding a glass of scotch, surrounded by sycophants. "Forio," Vanessa breathed. The man who had ordered the hit at the hospital. The man who wanted her dead because of a ledger she didn't have. "He looks comfortable," she noted with a surge of anger. "He thinks he has one," Luca said, his voice is cold. "He thinks his sniper is in position on the north balcony. He thinks his men have secured the exits. He doesn't know that my men quietly removed his sniper 20 minutes ago. And he doesn't know that the waiters pouring his scotch work for me. So, we just wait, we mingle, we let him seal. We let him think his plan is working. He needs to believe you're exposed." They moved through the crowd. Luca introduced her simply as Vanessa. He didn't give a last name. He didn't explain. The mystery only added to the tension. Men shook Luca's hand with differential fear. Women looked at Vanessa with jealous scrutiny. Vanessa played her part. She smiled. She accepted a glass of champagne she didn't drink. She laughed softly at jokes she didn't hear, but her senses were dialed up to 11. She noticed the waiter lingered too long near the pillar. She noticed the man by the curtains who wasn't drinking. "You're doing well," Luca murmured against her ear as they paused near a towering ice sculpture. "Better than well. You're natural." "I'm terrified," she whispered back, keeping her smile fixed. "Good. Fear keeps Yao sharp." Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. Victoria had seen them. The older man stopped laughing. He set his glass down, his eyes locked onto Vanessa across the room. It was a look of pure unadulterated malice. He whispered something to the man beside him, and the man nodded and slipped away into the crowd. "He's initiating," Luca said, his muscles tensing under the soot. "He's giving the order." "Is it time?" Vanessa asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Almost. The band is changing tempo." The string quartet faded out, and a full orchestra began to play. The notes were slow, melodic, haunting, avals may I. Luca extended his hand. This was it, the signal. Vanessa placed her hand in his. Yes. He led her to the dance floor. They were the first coupleto step out. The spotlight hit them, blindingly bright. For a moment, it was just the two of them in a circle of light, surrounded by darkness and danger. Luca pulled her close. His right hand gripped her waist firmly, his left holding hers up. They began to move. Luca danced the way he fought with fluid, commanding precision. He led her effortlessly, spinning her through the steps. "Listen to me," Luca said, his voice low and intense as they turned. "In 60 seconds, the lights will cut. When they do, you drop to the floor. Do not hesitate. You drop and you crawl toward the exit behind the bandstand. I will cover you. I'm not leaving you." Vanessa whispered, tightening her grip on his shoulder. "You are not leaving me," Luca corrected. "You are moving to the extraction point. I will be right behind you, but I need to clear the path. Vittorio's men are going to rush the floor. What about the sniper? Neutralized, but he has a backup to inside. For men, I've marked 3. The 4th is a wild card." They spun again. The velvet of her dress swirled around her legs. Vanessa looked over Luca's shoulder. She saw the man Vittorio had whispered to. He was moving toward the edge of the dance floor, his hand reaching inside his jacket. "Luca, 3 o'clock, she hissed. "I see him," Luca said calmly. "Keep dancing. Let him get closer. He's going to shoot. He's going to try." The music swelled, the crescendos building. The tension in the room was palpable. The guests seemed to sense that something was wrong. The air was too thick. The smiles too brittle. "Vanessa," Lucas said, pulling her slightly closer, his forehead resting against hers for a fleeting second. "Whatever happens next, know that I bought that dollhouse. I bought the debt, and I would burn this entire city to keep you safe. Not because of the book, because of you." Vanessa's breath hitched. It was a confession in the middle of a battlefield. "I know," she whispered. The music hit its peak, click. The ballroom plunged into darkness. The blackout was absolute. A collective scream rose from the crowd, a wave of panic. Vanessa didn't scream. She dropped. She fell to her knees, the velvet dress cushioning the impact against the polished floor. Above her, the air exploded. Pop, pop, pop. Muzzle flashes illuminated the dark like strobe lights. It wasn't the sniper. It was Luca. He had drawn his weapon the instant the lights died. Vanessa scrambled on her hands and knees, moving toward Debendant. As instructed, the chaos was deafening. Guests were stampeding, glass was shattering, and the orchestra had abandoned their instruments. She looked back. In the strobe light flashes of gunfire, she saw Luca. He wasn't hiding. He was standing tall in the center-off floor, firing with cold precision at the shadows rushing him. He was a Demonov, vengeance in a tuxedo. "Luca!" she screamed, seeing a figure lunge at him from the side. The wild card. Luca spun, using his gun as a club to strike Thetica across the face, then kicked him away. He fired again, clearing Thess space. "Go, Vanessa, go." He roared, his voice cutting through the screams. She reached the edge of the bandstand. A hand reached out from the heavy velvet curtains behind the stage. Vanessa flinched, raising her arm to strike, but a familiar voice hissed. "It's Bruno, Mrs. Grant. Come with me." Bruno, Luca's head of security, pulled her behind Decatane. The backstage area was dimly lit by emergency red lights. "Where is Luca?" Vanessa demanded, trying to pull away. "He's right behind us. Move. We have to get to the loading dock. Phase 2 is active." Vanessa ran, lifting the heavy skirts of her dress. They burst through the rear exit doors into the freezing alleyway behind the hotel. The cold air hit her sweat, dampened skin like a physical blow. A black sports car, low, sleek, and aggressive, skidded around the corner and screeched to a halt in front of them. The passenger door flew open. "Get in," Bruno shouted, shoving her toward it. Vanessa scrambled into the low seat. The engine was roaring like a trapped beast. A second later, the rear door of the hotel banged open again. Luca burst out. He was breathing hard, his tie undone, his gun still in his hand. He didn't look back at the chaos he had left inside. He sprinted for the car, vaulting into the driver's seat. "Are you hid?" he demanded, looking at her immediately. "No, you know." He slammed the car into gear. "Victoria's down, but his lieutenants are still standing. They will be chasing." "Is this phase 2? Vanessa asked, gripping the dashboard as Luca floored the accelerator, the tires smoking against the asphalt. "Phase 2, Luca confirmed, his eyes checking the rearview mirror where headlights were already appearing. "We draw them out, welded them away from the guests, away from the civilians. We take them to the killing ground." "The warehouse," Vanessa realized. "The warehouse," Luca agreed. He reached over and took her hand, squeezing it once before returning it to the wheel. "You looked beautiful, Vanessa, even crawling on the floor." Vanessa let out a breathless, hysterical laugh. "You know how to show a girl a good time, Santoro." Luca smirked, a flash of white teeth in the dark car. "The night is young." He drifted the car around a corner, the J-force slamming Vanessa against the door. Behind them, 3 SUVs peeled out of the alley, their engines screaming in pursuit. The gallow was over. The hunt had begun. Vanessa looked at her dress. The hem was stained with grease from the floor and the velvet was torn. It didn't look like a queen's gown anymore. It looked like battle gear. And as she watched Luca navigate the city streets at 100 meters anha, leading the wolves into his trap, she realized she wouldn't have it any other way. "They're gaining," she noted, watching the lights in the mirror. "Let them," Luca said softly. "They need to feel like they can catch us. That's the only way they'll follow us into the dark." He shifted gears, the car surging forward into the snowy night, leaving the glamour of the ballroom far behind. Ahead lay the industrial district, Thewer House, and the end of the line for the men who had dared to threaten what belonged to Luca. Santoro. The engine off the sports car roared like a dying dragon, a mechanical scream that vibrated through the chassis and straight into Vanessa's bones. The city lights had long since faded into the rearview mirror, replaced by theodolite flickering sodium lamps of the industrial district. Here, the snow didn't look like a Christmas decoration. It looked like ash coating the rusting skeletons of abandoned factories and shipping containers. "They are still with us," Luca said, his voice terrifyingly calm over the noise of the engine. He glanced at the side mirror, his eyes narrowing. 3 cars. They are aggressive. Vanessa gripped the door handle until her knuckles turned white. She twisted in her seat to look back. 3 pairs of blinding LED headlights were cutting through the darkness, weaving in and out of the lane, closing the distance. These weren't the police. These were wolves chasing a wounded deer. "I thought we were leading them to a trap," Vanessa shouted over the roar off the tires on the slick asphalt. "This feels like we're just running." "We error positioning," Luca corrected, jerking the steering wheel sharply to the left. Decker drifted, the rear tires catching the slush, and sliding perilously close to a concrete barrier, before gripping again. My men are 5 minutes out. We have to hold them here until the hammer drops. 5 minutes is a long time when people are rush shooting at you. As if on cue, the rear window shattered. The sound was explosive, a deafening crack that sent safety glass raining down onto the back seat. Vanessa screamed, ducking low, covering her head with her arms. The cold night air rushed into the cabin, bringing the smell of exhaust and gunpowder. "Stay down," Luca roared. He didn't flinch. He didn't duck. He kept his eyes on the road and his foot pinned to the floor. "Vanessa, get down in the footwell." She scrambled off the seat, curling herself into a ball in the tight space beneath the dashboard. The velvet of her dress, once a symbol of her queen-like entrance, was now just fabric tangling around her legs, stained with grease and glass shards. She felt Decker swerve violently again, then a sickening metal-on-metal crunch as one of the pursuing SUVs tried to ram them from the side. "Hold on," Luca warned. He slammed on the brakes. It was a maneuver born of madness and precision. The SUV behind them, expecting a chase, couldn't react in time. It clipped the rear bumper of Luca's car, lost traction on the ice, and spun wildly out of Cantrell, slamming into a parked trailer with a sound like a bomb going off. But the maneuver cost them. Luca's car spun 180, sliding backward across the ice until it slammed into a loading dock ramp. The impact threw Vanessa against glove compartment. The airbags didn't deploy. Luca must have disabled them for the tactical driving, but Thayforce knocked the wind out of her. Silence returned for a split second, heavy and ringing. Then the sound of doors opening, voices shouting in Italian, angry, violent voices. "Out," Luca commanded. He was already moving. He kicked his door open and rolled out, his gun raised. "Vanessa, move the warehouse." Vanessa scrambled out of Thepasenja's side. Her legs felt like jelly, but adrenaline was a powerful drug. She didn't look at the wreckage. She looked at the massive, rusting, corrugated metal doors of the warehouse in front of them. A gunshot cracked through the air, hitting the pavement inches. From her heels, "Run!" Luca shouted, firing back. He stood in Theopan, exposing himself to draw their fire away from her. Vanessa lifted her heavy skirts and sprinted. She hit through a house door, finding the small personnel entrance Luca had aimed for. It was locked. "Luca, it's locked." He waltzed beside her in a second, breathing hard. He didn't fumble for keys. He raced his foot and kicked the lock mechanism with a force that would have shattered a normal man's ankle. The rusted metal groaned and gave way. He shoved the door open and pushed her inside, following her and slamming it shut just as a hail of bullets pinged against the exterior steel. Inside, it was pitch black and freezing. The air smelled of old oil, dust, and decay. It was a cavernous space filled with shadows and old machinery. "Barricade," Luca ordered, his voice tight. Vanessa grabbed a heavy wooden pallet leaning against the wall and dragged it over. Luca helped her, shoving a rusted metal cabinet against the door. It wouldn't hold them forever, but it would buy them seconds. "Are you okay?" Vanessa asked, turning to him in the gloom. The moonlight was filtering in through high, broken windows, cutting beams of blue light through the dust. "I'm fine," Luca said, but his voice was strained. Vanessa stepped closer. In the slice of moonlight, she saw it. The pristine white shirt of his tuxedo was no longer white on the left side. A dark spreading stain was soaking through the fabric, dripping down his sleeve. "You're hit," she gasped, reaching out. "It's a graze," Luca dismissed, trying to reload his weapon with one hand. "Just a scratch." "That is not a scratch, Luca." Vanessa's nurse training overrode her fear. She grabbed his arm, forcing him to stop. "Sit down now. We don't have time." "Sit down, or I will sedate you with a brick," she hissed, her blue eyes flashing. "You are bleeding out. You can't fight if you pass out from blood loss." Luca looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes. Thesum fire that had made her throat boiling. Coffee at a hitman. He sat down on a crate, his face pale but composed. "Fix it fast," he said. "They are flanking. They will come through Thelodin Bays in less than 3 minutes." Vanessa didn't waste words. She grabbed the lapel of his tuxedo jacket and ripped it open. The shirt was soaked. She tore the buttons off, exposing his holder. It was an ugly wound, a furrow dug by a bullet through the deltoid muscle. It wasn't arterial, thank God, but it was bleeding heavily and would limit his movement. "I need pressure," she muttered, scanning the dark room. There were no bandages, no first aid kits. She looked down at herself, the burgundy velvet dress, without hesitation. She grabbed the slit of the skirt and ripped. The sound of expensive fabric tearing was loud in the quiet warehouse. She tore a long, thick strip from the hem, ruining the garment completely. She didn't care, it was just cloth. He was flesh and blood. She folded the velveteen to a thick pad and pressed it directly onto the wound. Luca hissed through his teeth, his head tipping back against the wall, eyes squeezing shut. "Breathe," Vanessa commanded, her hands steady now that they had a job to do. "I need to tie this tight. It's going to hurt. Do it." She ripped another strip and wrapped it around his shoulder, pulling it tight enough to cut off the circulation to the skin, but stop the bleeding. She tied it off with a savage knot. Her hands were covered in his blood. It was warm and sticky, a stark contrast to the freezing air. "There," she said, her voice shaking slightly now that the task was done. "It will hold, but you can't use that arm to shoot." Luca opened his eyes. He looked at the makeshift bandage, the red velvet, now stained with a darker red. Then he looked at her. Her hair was wild, coming loose from its pins. Her face was smudged with dirt. Her dress was destroyed, hanging in tatters around her legs. He reached out with his good hand and touched her face. His thumb traced her lower lip. "I never wanted you to see this," he whispered, his voice rough with pain and something else. "Shame. I wanted to give you the penthouse, the dresses, the lights. I didn't want to drag you into the gutter with me." Vanessa covered his hand with hers, pressing it against her cheek. "Luca, look around. We aren't in a gutter. We're in a fortress, and I'm not looking at a monster. I'm looking at the man who came for me when no one else would. I almost got you killed," he said, the guilt eating at him tonight. "The hospital. I am poison, Vanessa." "You're not poison," she said fiercely, leaning in until their foreheads touched. "You're the antidote. You saved me from a life that was killing me slowly. I would rather bleed with you in this warehouse than live another day safe in that apartment with Daniel." Lucas stared at her. Stunned by the ferocity of her loyalty, he leaned forward and kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It tasted of copper, adrenaline, and desperation. It was a seal, a promise clang. The sound of metal hitting concrete echoed from Theffa's side of the warehouse. Luca broke the kiss instantly, the soldier returning to the surface. There inside, he stood up, testing his left arm. He winced but nodded. He checked the magazine of his gun. 2 rounds left. I have 1 spare clip. That's it. Where is Bruno? Vanessa asked, backing up against the crate. Close, but not close enough. Luca reached to the small of his back and pulled out a second weapon. A smaller compact pistol he kept as a backup. He checked the safety and handed it to Vanessa. She stared at the gun. It was heavy, cold, and lethal. She had never held a gun in her life. She healed people. She didn't break them. Take it, Luca ordered. Safety is off. You point and you pull the trigger. Don't think about who they are. Think about Lily. Vanessa took the gun. Her hand trembled, then steadied. Lily, okay, she whispered. Get behind those oil drums, Luca. Instructed, pointing to a stack of barrels near the center of the room. Keep your head down. Do not shoot unless. They crossed the yellow line on the floor. If they cross that line, you empty the clip. Understood. Understood. Luca moved away from her, heading toward the shadows on the right flank, drawing their attention. Victorio sent boys to do a man's job. Luca shouted into the darkness, his voice echoing off the metal walls. Come out. Let's finish these. A burst of automatic gunfire answered him, sparks flying from the pillar Luque had just passed. He returned fire. 2 controlled shots. A scream echoed in the dark. Vanessa crocheted behind. The barrels, gripping the pistol with both hands. Her heart was beating so fast it felt like a hummingbird wrapped in her chest. She watched the darkness. She saw movement to her left, while Luca was engaging the main group on the right. A shadow was creeping along the wall, heading toward his. Blind spot. A man in a dark, tactical vest, moving silently. He had a shotgun. Who was going to flank Luca? He was going to kill him. Vanessa didn't think. She didn't hesitate. The image of Lilia penning her dollhouse flashed in her mind. The image of Luca bleeding on the crate. She stood up. Hey! She screamed. The shadow turned. Surprised to see a woman in a tattered ball gown standing amidst the wreckage. Vanessa raised. Thegan, she didn't close her eyes. She aimed for the center of the mass, just like Luca had said. She pulled the trigger. The recoil jerked her arms up, shocking her. The gun barked loud and dongry. The man grunted, spinning around as the bullet hit his shoulder. Head dropped the shotgun, stumbling back. Vanessa, get down. Luca roared from across the room. The man scrambled for his weapon with his good hand. Vanessa fired again. The bullet hit the floor near his feet, but it was enough to make him scramble back into cover. I'm here, she shouted to Luca. I'm watching your back. Luca laughed. A short, dark, incredulous sound. That's my girl. But the situation was deteriorating. More shadows were pouring in. They were pinned down. Luca fired his last round from the main clip and slammed the sporane. We're out of time, Luca yelled. Vanessa, move back to the office. Go, no, go. Suddenly, the warehouse doors, the massive loading bay doors at the fore end, exploded inward. It wasn't a kick. It was a truck. A reinforced black armored truck smashed through the corrugated metal like it was paper, headlights blinding everyone in Thurum. The Ndrangheta gunman froze, blinded. The rear doors of the truck flew open. Bruno stepped out, holding an assault rifle. Behind him were 6 men in full tactical gear with the Santoro crest on their vests. "Clear the room," Bruno ordered. The warehouse erupted in noise. It was a symphony of violence. The Santoro team moved, with military efficiency sweeping through the shadows. The Ndrangheta mercenaries didn't stand a chance. Within 30 seconds, the shooting stopped. Silence returned, heavier than before. Vanessa lowered the gun, her ears ringing. She stood up slowly from behind the barrels. The air was thick with smoke and dust. "Clear!" Bruno shouted. Luca emerged from the shadows. He was limping slightly, holding his wounded shoulder, but he was slith. He walked toward Vanessa. He didn't run this time. He walked with Therheavy, an inevitable stride of a man who had survived the end of the world. He stopped in front of her. He looked at the gun in her hand. He looked at the man she had shot, who was now being zip-tied by Bruno's men. "You shot him," Luca said, sounding Iraq. "He was going to hurt you," Vanessa said, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. The adrenaline was crashing. Her knees felt weak. Luca took the gun from her hand gently, engaging the safety and tucking Geit into his belt. Then he pulled her into him with his good arm. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling the scent of gunpowder and perfume. "It's over," he whispered against her skin. "The Ndrangheta is broken. Vittorio's dead. His men are gone. It's over." Vanessa slumped against him, letting him take her weight. She wrapped her arms around his waist, careful of his wound. She felt the sticky wetness of his blood on her hands, but it didn't scare her anymore. It was just proof of life. "I need to get you to a doctor," she mumbled into his chest. "We have a medic team in the convoy," Luca said. He pulled back to look at her. His face was stir with soot and sweat, but his eyes were clear. But first, he looked around the ruined warehouse, at the shattered glass, the bullet holes, the wreckage. Then he looked at her, torn dress, messy hair, blood on her hands. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," he said, and he meant it. He didn't see a mess. He saw a survivor. He saw a queen who had forged her crown in fire. "I want to go home," Vanessa whispered. "Not the penthouse. Not the safe house. I want to go. I just want to be with you and Lily. Home." Luca repeated the word. Like a vow. "Yes. Let's go home." Bruno approached them, looking respectful. "Buttigieg boss, we need to move. Police will be here in 10 minutes. The cleanup crew is inbound." "Let's go," Luca said. He guided Vanessa toward the armory truck. She stopped at the door and looked back one last time at the dark warehouse. She was leaving more Thanjas, a ruined dress in there. She was leaving the last of her fear. She had first death. She had held a weapon, and she had stood her ground. She wasn't just the woman the Mafia boss had saved anymore. She was the woman who had saved him back. "Vanessa?" Luca called from the truck, his hand outstretched. She took it. She climbed up into the safety of the armored vehicle, sitting next to him on the bench seat. As the truck rumbled to life and pulled out into the snowy night, leaving the carnage behind, Vanessa rested her head on Luca's uninjured shoulder. He kissed the top of her head. "Sleep," he murmured. I'll wake you when we get there. Where? To the beginning, Lucas said. The real beginning. The convoy moved out, a line of black steel cutting through the white snow, heading toward a Christmas morning that had been bought with blood and paid for with loyalty. The war was won. Now they just had to survive the peace. The morning sun that filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Theppen House was not the harsh grey light of a winter storm. It was gold, brilliant and blinding, reflecting off the fresh layer of snow that coated the city like a pristine blanket. It was December 25th, Christmas morning. Vanessa Grant woke up slowly, her body heavy with the kind of deep, restorative sleep she hadn't experienced in years. For a moment, suspended between dreams and wakefulness, she panicked. Her hand shot out across the sheets, searching for the cold, empty space of her old mattress, waiting for the sound of Daniel's angry footsteps in the hallway or the draft from the broken window. Instead, her hand brushed against silk sheets that felt like water. The air smelled of pine needles, roasting coffee, and expensive cologne. Thiesolence wasn't threatening. It was absolute guarded and safe. She sat up, blinking against the light. She was alone in the massive bed, but the indentation on the pillow beside her proved she hadn't started the night that way. She pulled the duvet up to her chin, a blush heating her cheeks as memories of the last 2 days washed over her. The warehouse, the blood, their drive back, and then the quiet aftermath where they had simply held each other. Too exhausted for passion, but too desperate for separation. Lucas, she whispered, though she knew he wasn't in the room. She slid out of bed, her feet sinking into the plush carpet. She grabbed the first thing she found, a white dress shirt draped over the velvet armchair. It was his. She slipped it on, the fabric swallowing her frame, the cuffs hanging past her fingertips. It smelled of him. Sandalwood, gunpowder, and the faint metallic temps of the antiseptic she had used to clean his wound. She walked out of the bedroom and down the long marble hallway. The penthouse, usually a monument to minimalism and cold luxury, had been. It looked as if the North Pole had exploded in the living room. A triously 12 tea tall stood in the center of the room, its branches heavy with crystal ornaments, red ribbons, and twinkling white lights. Garlands or fresh holly draped the fireplace mantel. Stockings hung by the chimney, 3 off them, 1 embroidered. With Luca, 1 with Vanessa, and a smaller one in the middle. That said, Lily. Vanessa stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. To Daisago, they had been bleeding in a freezing warehouse. Today, they were inside a Hallmark movie funded by Akram. Syndicate. Luca was sitting in the leather armchair near the window. He was wearing dark pajama pants and nothing gills. His chest bare except for the heavy black sling that cradled his left arm. The white bandage on his shoulder stood out against his olive skin. He was holding a mug of coffee in his good hand, staring at the tree with a look of Fintin's, brooding. Concentration, as if he were trying to calculate the structural integrity of the ornaments. You did this, Vanessa said softly, stepping into the room. Luca turned. His dark eyes swept over her, taking in the messy hair, the oversized shirt, and devil legs. A flicker of heat ignited in his gaze, but he masked it quickly, replacing it with a guarded expression. My staff did this, he corrected, his voice raspy. I just authorized the expenditure. The elves worked for a retainer. Vanessa smiled, walking over to him. She didn't hesitate. She sat on the wide arm of his chair, her hand resting gently on his uninjured shoulder. It's beautiful, Luca. Lily is going to lose her mind. Is she awake? Not yet. She sleeps like the dead when she's safe. Good. Luca took a sip of his coffee, his jaw tightening. Let her sleep. We need to talk before she wakes up. The tone of his voice sent a chill through Vanessa that had nothing to do with the winter air. It was the business voice, the voice he used when he was ordering Bruno to clear a room or be in Gadet. Talk about what? Vanessa asked, her stomach twisting. About Daniel. About the Ontrangata. Daniel is gone, Lucas said flatly. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The past tense was final. The police found his body in Additch, Jersey this morning. Drug deal gone wrong. A tragic overdose. Case closed. Vanessa exhaled, long and unsteady, as if her body was finally letting go of an old, stubborn tension. Dead. The monster under her bed was dead. She waited for the grief or the guilt, but there was nothing. Just a vast, empty space where the fear used to be. And the Andrangheta? She asked. Broken, Luca said. The raid on Thewer House was decisive. We cut off the head of the snake. The remnants have fled back to Italy. You are safe, Vanessa. Truly safe. No one is looking for you. No one is hunting you. Okay, she said slowly, watching his face. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the snow falling outside. That sounds like good news. So, why do you look like you're about to fire me? Lucas set the coffee mug down on the side table with a sharp click. He reached into the pocket of his pajama pants and pulled out a long rectangular velvet box. It wasn't a ring box. It was too long for that. Held it out to her. His hand was steady, but his knuckles were white. Open it. Vanessa took the box. Her fingers trembled slightly. She opened the lid. Inside, resting on the black satin, was a heavy iron key and a folded stack of legal documents. What is this? She whispered. Freedom, Luca said. He shifted in the chair, wincing as the movement pulled at his stitches. That is the deed to a house in Connecticut. 4 bedrooms, big yard, good school dist. It is fully furnished and paid. For in your name. The taxes are prepaid for 20 years, he pointed to the papers. And that is a trust fund for Lily. Ether's enough money to ensure she never has to ask Santa for food again. She can go to college. She can travel. She can do whatever she wants. Vanessa stared at the contents of the box. It was a fortune. It was the escape hatch she had dreamed of every night she lay awake in her old apartment. It was a clean slate. I don't understand, she said, looking up at him. Are you sending us away? Luca finally looked at her. His eyes were dark pools of pain. I am giving you a choice. A real choice. When we met at the mall, you were desperate. You didn't choose me. You grabbed the only lifeline that was thrown to you. You needed protection. You needed money. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. You have those things now. Thethrit is gone. You don't need the monster anymore. Monster. Vanessa repeated, her voice rising. Look at me, Vanessa. Lucas snapped, gesturing to Hisling, to the bruises on his ribs, to the invisible weight of the violence he carried. I am a man who kills people. Earm, a man who starts wars in warehouses. 2 days ago, You had to shoot a manto savi in my life. You had blood on your hands. My blood. His blood. He looked away, shame coloring his features. I never wanted that for you. I wanted Tobe your hero, not your corrupter. You are a nurse. You heal people. I break them. If you stay here, if you stay with me, that violence will always be a shadow in the corner. You can take that key, Vanessa. You can take Lily and go to Connecticut and live a normal, safe, beautiful life where no one shoots at you. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Vanessa looked at the key. It was heavy, cool metal. It represented safety, normally the life she was supposed to want. Then she looked at Luca. Lily was napping on the sofa inside, guarding a hoard of treasures. The snow was still falling, large soft flakes drifting down from the grey sky. Fessity stretched out below them, white and silent. Luca stood behind Vanessa, his good arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. His coat was draped over her shoulder sagging, just like that first night on the roof of the mall. But this time, she wasn't shivering. This time, she wasn't looking for the exit. Are you happy? Luca asked quietly, resting his cheek against a temple. Vanessa looked out at the skyline. She thought about the key she had thrown in the fire. She had thought about the danger that would always be a part of this life. She knew there would be other enemies, other words, other scars. But she also felt the solid beat of his heart against her back. She felt the warmth of his protection. She felt the love that had survived 15 years of silence. I have a daughter who is safe, she said. I have a home that isn't falling apart, and I have the man I love. She turned in his arms, careful of his shoulder, and looked up at him. I'm not just happy, Luca. I'm home. Luca smiled. And this time, it touched his eyes, banishing for less of the winter chill. He leaned down and kissed her, a slow, deep kiss that tasted of coffee and forever. Merry Christmas, Vanessa. Merry Christmas, boss. Below them, the city lights began to flicker on one by one, illuminating the snow. But up here, in the penthouse at the top of the world, the only light that mattered was the one they had kindled between them. A wish made in desperation, granted. In violence and sealed with love. The little girl had scud for a daddy. The woman had asked for safety, and the Mafia boss, against all odds, had delivered both. Wish granted.